I stared at the elegantly set dinner table, watching steam rise from the perfectly arranged Sunday roast. The familiar scent of rosemary and thyme filled our family's dining room, but tonight something felt different, heavier, like the air itself was holding its breath. "Emily, pass the potatoes," my father said without looking at me. His voice carried that stern edge I'd grown familiar with over the past few months, the one that suggested I was barely worth acknowledging. I was 32, single, and according to my family, the disappointment of our prestigious Williams lineage. What they didn't know was that I'd spent the last 6 years quietly building something they couldn't begin to understand. "Did you hear about Marcus?" my mother asked, her perfectly manicured hands gesturing toward my younger brother. "He just made junior partner at his law firm, youngest in the company's history." Marcus smirked from across the table. At 29, he'd always been the golden child, the one who followed the expected path: law school, prestigious firm, country club membership, everything our parents had mapped out. "That's wonderful," I said softly, taking a small bite of roast beef. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for signs of jealousy or resentment. I gave them neither. "Speaking of success," my father began, placing his fork down with deliberate slowness, "we need to discuss the house situation." My stomach tightened. I'd been waiting for this moment. 6 years ago, when I left my corporate job to start my own real estate investment company, they'd laughed, called it a phase, said I'd come crawling back when reality hit. Instead, I'd worked in silence, building a portfolio that now included 12 properties across 3 states. But they didn't know that. They thought I was barely surviving, living in the old family home out of their generosity. The same home my grandmother had left to me in her will, much to everyone's shock. "Emily," my father continued, his voice growing harder, "your mother and I have decided it's time for a change. Marcus needs a proper family home now that he's making partner. Somewhere to start his own family." I took another small bite, chewing slowly. "I see. Don't act dense," Marcus cut in. "You've been living there rent-free for years. It's time someone responsible took over. Someone with a real career." My mother nodded in agreement. "We've already spoken to the family lawyer. The house should have gone to your father anyway. Your grandmother wasn't thinking clearly when she made that will." The insult to my grandmother's memory stung more than their dismissal of me. She'd been the only one who saw me clearly, who understood why I spent weekends studying real estate markets instead of attending society functions. "So," my father said, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out a document, "we need you to sign this. It transfers ownership back to the family trust, where it belongs." I glanced at the paper but didn't reach for it. "And if I don't?" Marcus laughed sharply. "Come on, Em. You can barely afford groceries. How long do you think you can keep up the property taxes? The maintenance? The mortgage payments?" If they'd bothered to check, they'd have known the mortgage was paid off 3 years ago. By me. But they never checked. Never asked. Never saw past their own assumptions. "We're being generous," my mother added. "We'll give you 3 months to find a new place. Maybe that little apartment complex on the east side. The one where your cleaning lady lives." The contempt in her voice made my teaspoon clink against china as I set it down. They'd never approved of Maria, who'd not only cleaned our family home for 20 years, but had become my first business partner, helping me identify undervalued properties in up-and-coming neighborhoods. "The house belongs to me," I said quietly, "legally and morally." My father's face darkened. Then you leave us no choice. He stood up, his imposing frame casting a shadow across the table. Leave your keys and get out. This house belongs to the family now. We'll handle this through our lawyers. I looked at each of them in turn. My father, rigid with authority he'd assumed was absolute. My mother, lips pursed in disapproval she'd perfected over years. Marcus, practically glowing with anticipated victory. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into my purse and pulled out my house keys. The same keys my grandmother had handed me on her deathbed, along with a whispered piece of advice. Sometimes silence is the best strategy. I placed them on the table with a soft clink. Thank you for dinner, I said, standing up. And for making this easier than I expected. Easier? Marcus scoffed. You're being kicked out. I smiled faintly. We'll see. As I walked to the door, my father called out, Don't bother trying to fight this, Emily. You can't afford the legal fees, and no bank will help you. I paused at the threshold, thinking about the documents waiting in my office. About the carefully orchestrated plan I'd set in motion the moment I heard whispers of their scheme 3 months ago. Good night, I said softly, and closed the door behind me. In my car, I pulled out my phone and sent a single text to my lawyer. It's time. Execute tomorrow morning. Then I drove home, my home, and prepared for what would happen when the mortgage company called them at 9 a.m. sharp with news that would shatter their carefully constructed reality. Because while they'd been busy underestimating me, I'd been busy building an empire. And tomorrow, they'd learn exactly what their disappointment of a daughter had become. The next morning, I sat in my home office, watching the autumn sunlight filter through tall windows. The antique grandfather clock, another gift from my grandmother, showed 8:57 a.m. In exactly 3 minutes, my family would receive a call that would change everything. My phone buzzed. A message from Maria. They just pulled up in the driveway. Your father, mother, and Marcus. They look angry. I smiled, remembering the conversation I'd had with Highland Mortgage Corporation last week. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. At precisely 9:00 a.m., I heard the doorbell ring. Then aggressive knocking. Emily, my father's voice boomed through the door. Open up immediately. I pressed the intercom button. I'm in a meeting. Please wait in the parlor. Maria will let you in. I could practically hear my mother's disdain at being greeted by the housekeeper, but they had no choice. As they settled into the parlor, my phone lit up with an incoming call. Robert Chen, Senior VP at Highland Mortgage. Everything's proceeding as planned, he said. I just spoke with your father. He wasn't pleased to learn about the transfer. I imagine not, I replied calmly. Thank you, Robert. I opened my laptop, checking my portfolio dashboard one last time. Everything was in place. 6 years of careful planning, of quiet acquisitions, of strategic patience, all leading to this moment. The parlor door burst open. My father stormed in, face flushed, waving his phone. What is the meaning of this? The mortgage company says you've transferred the loan to your corporation? That you own not just this house but half the properties in the Heights district. Behind him, my mother clutched her designer handbag like a shield. Marcus looked less smug now, his lawyer's mind finally beginning to grasp the situation. I turned my laptop around, showing them the portfolio dashboard. Would you like to sit down? This might take a while to explain. Explain what? Marcus snapped. How you've been deceiving us. No, I said quietly. How you've been deceiving yourselves. I pulled up the first document, the original deed to our family home. When grandmother left me this house, you all assumed I couldn't handle it, that I'd fail. What you didn't know was that she also left me her real estate investment guidelines, her strategies, her vision. My mother sank into a leather armchair, her composure cracking. But you've been struggling. Working from home. No office, no employees. I clicked to the next screen. A satellite view of the Heights district, with properties highlighted in blue. Those aren't signs of struggle, Mother. They're signs of strategy. Every property in blue belongs to Williams Capital Investment Group, my company. Impossible, my father whispered. That's nearly 40 properties. 47, I corrected, including the building where Marcus's law firm rents their top-floor office space. I bought it through a subsidiary last year. Your rent helps fund my new acquisitions. Marcus collapsed into a chair, his face pale. The merger meeting room, the one they suddenly renovated last month. My building manager mentioned you liked the changes, I said with a small smile. I'm glad. I chose the design myself. My father's hands were shaking now. The mortgage company said, they said you've paid off over $780,000. I finished for him. Yes, 3 years ago. The house has been fully owned by my corporation since then. I just let you all believe otherwise because, well, it was simpler that way. But how? My mother demanded. Where did you get the capital? I thought about the nights I'd spent studying market trends, the weekends exploring emerging neighborhoods with Maria, the relationships I'd built with local business owners and developers, all while they assumed I was failing. I started small, I explained. Used my savings to buy a foreclosed duplex. Renovated it with Maria's help. Yes, Mother, our housekeeper is actually my business partner and owns 15% of the company. We flipped that property for triple the investment, then leveraged it for larger purchases. I pulled up another document, my company's current valuation. The number made my mother gasp. She couldn't finish the sentence. More than the family trust, I supplied. Yes, significantly more. My father straightened his tie, his businessman instincts finally overriding his anger. Why tell us now? Why not sooner? Because you needed to show your true colors first, I said calmly. I wanted to see if you really try to take my home. The home grandmother trusted me with. And you did. I stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the garden where I'd first dreamed of building something of my own. Now we can discuss new terms. You can continue living in the family properties. Yes, I own those too, but with formal lease agreements. Market rate rent. Professional terms. You charge your own family rent, my mother asked incredulously. The same way you were ready to make me homeless. I turned back to face them. Yes, business is business, isn't it, Father? That's what you always taught us. Marcus stood up, straightening his expensive suit. The family lawyers will already know. I cut him off. I hired them last year when I acquired their building. They work for me now, too. The silence that followed was deafening. Years of assumptions, of dismissals, of quiet condescension, all shattered in a single morning. My father was the first to speak again. What do you want? Respect, I said simply. Not as your daughter. You've made your feelings clear on that front. But as a businesswoman who's built something substantial, something real. I handed each of them a folder containing new lease agreements for their respective properties. You have until Friday to sign. After that, we can discuss alternative arrangements. And if we refuse, Marcus challenged, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. I smiled, remembering my grandmother's words about silence and strategy. Then I'll have to give my other tenants first right of refusal on those properties. I believe your law firm's competitors have been quite interested in that top-floor office space. As they left my office, folders clutched in shaking hands, I heard my mother whisper to my father, "Did you know? All this time, did you have any idea?" "No," he replied, sounding older than I'd ever heard him. "We never really looked." I sat back down at my desk, letting out a long breath. Maria appeared with a cup of tea, her special blend that had gotten me through countless late nights of planning. "They finally see you," she said, placing the cup beside me. I nodded, thinking about the long journey from that first small duplex to now. "They see the power," I corrected. "They don't see me yet, but maybe now they'll start looking." My phone buzzed with messages from other property owners in the Heights, eager to discuss acquisitions. The empire I'd built quietly was about to become very visible. But first, I had a company to run, tenants to meet, and a grandmother's legacy to honor. The family drama could wait. After all, I had all the time in the world now, and all the power too. 1 month after the confrontation in my office, I stood at the window of my newly opened headquarters in downtown Chicago. The entire top floor of the Morrison Building, another recent acquisition, offered a panoramic view of the city I'd slowly been reshaping. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Can we talk? Alone?" In the weeks since the revelation, my family had processed things differently. Mother had taken to calling daily, oscillating between apologetic reminiscence and thinly veiled attempts to understand my sudden success. Father had retreated into stoic silence, signing the lease agreements without comment. But Marcus had been suspiciously quiet. "Come by the office at 2, I texted back. Sarah, my executive assistant, appeared at my door. "The Henderson Group is here for the merger discussion." I nodded, straightening my blazer. "Send them in." The meeting went smoothly. They'd been trying to acquire one of my smaller properties for months. Now they were selling their entire portfolio to me instead. Funny how quickly things change when people realize who really holds the power. At precisely 2 p.m., Marcus arrived. He looked different. Less polished, more human somehow. The swagger was gone. "Nice office," he said, glancing around. "Better than my firm's." "Your firm's lease is up for renewal next month," I replied, gesturing for him to sit. "We should discuss that too." He sank into the chair across from my desk. "That's partly why I'm here. They're making cuts. The merger fell through after the clients learned about the ownership changes." I studied him carefully. And I'm being let go," he admitted. "Apparently, having your landlord as an estranged sister isn't great for business." I leaned back, letting the information settle. "What do you want, Marcus?" He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood. "Understanding, I guess. How did you do it? All of it? Right under our noses?" I thought about all the family dinners I'd sat through, listening to them praise his accomplishments while dismissing mine. All the hints I'd dropped that they'd ignored. "I learned from grandmother," I said finally. "Not just about real estate, but about patience. About letting people underestimate you while you build something undeniable. She always said you were different," he murmured. "Special, I just thought." "You thought she was being kind to the failing granddaughter," I finished. "Everyone did. That was useful." I opened my laptop, pulling up a document I'd prepared weeks ago, waiting for this moment. Your firm isn't failing because of our family drama, I told him. It's failing because their business model is outdated. Their client acquisition strategy is weak, and their market analysis is surface level at best. He blinked. How do you know all this? Because I've been studying them for years, just like I study every tenant, every competitor, every potential opportunity. I turned the laptop toward him. This is a preliminary analysis of where they're bleeding money and how to fix it. Why show me this? Because I'm offering you a job, I said simply. Not out of family obligation, but because you're smart when you're not blinded by ego. I need someone to head our legal department as we expand into new markets. The shock on his face was almost comical. You want me to work for you? With me, I corrected, as an equal partner in the legal side of the business. But understand something. This isn't about family. This is business. You'll earn your place, or you'll lose it, just like anyone else. He stared at the contract I placed before him. Does Father know about this offer? Father doesn't make my business decisions anymore, I replied. Neither does Mother, or anyone else. That's the first lesson you'll need to learn if you accept. Marcus picked up the contract, reading it carefully. His lawyer's instincts hadn't completely abandoned him. The salary is less than I make now, he noted. The base salary is, I agreed. But the equity compensation is significantly higher. Another lesson. Build ownership, not just income. A small smile tugged at his lips. Grandmother taught you that too. Among other things. I stood, walking to the window again. She taught me that real power isn't in what you show people. It's in what you build while they're not looking. He signed the contract without further negotiation, another first. As he left my office, he paused at the door. I'm sorry, Emily, for everything. I know, I said quietly. Now prove it by helping me build something even bigger. That evening, I visited grandmother's grave, placing fresh flowers beside her headstone. The autumn wind rustled through nearby trees as I sat on the small bench we'd often shared. You were right, I said softly. About everything. About letting them think what they wanted while I built what I needed. About patience being more powerful than pride. I told her about Marcus, about the expansion plans, about the empire that had grown from her initial lessons. I like to think she would have been proud, not just of the success, but of how I'd achieved it. My phone buzzed again. Mother, asking about Sunday dinner. This time, she suggested having it at my house. A small acknowledgement of the new reality. I texted back a simple yes. Let them come. Let them sit at my table, in my home, in my success. Let them finally see what had been there all along. A woman who turned their underestimation into an empire. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should watch most carefully. Sometimes the child they dismiss becomes the force they can't ignore. And sometimes, just sometimes, silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. I looked up at the darkening sky, feeling the weight of everything I'd built, everything I'd become. Thank you, grandmother, I whispered, for teaching me the power of being underestimated. Then I walked back to my car, ready to continue building, growing, leading. Not for them anymore. Never again for them. But for myself, and for every other person who's been told they're not enough. Because I wasn't just Emily anymore. I was the CEO of a real estate empire, the owner of half the city's prime properties, and living proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't in what you say. It's in what you build while they're not looking.